All right, what's up, guys? Uh, we're chasing some trends today with a Mordhau weapons tier list. Uh, there's a few others already out there, but uh, they look really bad and stuff. So I'm gonna make my own. Couple things before I start, though. First off, the way I'm gonna be rating these weapons is first off relative to their point value. So that doesn't mean every 1 point weapon gets an automatic F. And they're also not going to be rated in a vacuum. And what I mean by that is if there's another weapon that basically does the same thing but better, the weapon that is like that weapon will then get a worse score just because there's something else you could just use. So is that this is all the melee weapons, not including any of the utility stuff, and then the peasant weapons. Might do a different video for the peasant weapons. But yeah, second is there's not gonna be any kind of crazy fucking like, oh, Subway is bad because the sandwiches taste like sandwiches. Shit. All right, fucking all right. None of that. So don't fucking like get upset because there's no big bomb drops in this one. All right, this is just gonna be a simple tier list. Not gonna do any dumb shit that makes everyone else want to respond. All right, this is just my honest opinion. Uh, and this is me over like close to 125 hours in the game. So definitely some people with more experience than me, but I'm relatively experienced and I've at least used all the weapons and I've got a pretty good understanding of what all they do. Third off, if you either want to respond or make your own tier list, this tier list is up on Tier Maker. Feel free to use it yourself. I'd appreciate a shout out though. But anyways, let's get right into this. I'm gonna go fast because we got I think 28 left to go. First off, we're gonna go with a dagger. I'm just gonna do this in order of point value. Dagger, I'm gonna put an A tier, and everyone's already freaking out. But hear me out. For 1 point, it is an amazing backup weapon. Does 40 damage to the 3 armor head on a stab, and super useful for finishing enemies off, changing up your timing, fighting in close quarters. If you haven't tried having a backup dagger yet for a big weapon, definitely do it. Totally worth the point. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. You can maybe put it in B. Excuse me, but I like it in A. Next up is the short sword. I'm going to be putting short sword in B. Similar to the dagger, and this is already what I'm talking about, if it's something that's better. Short sword is a little worse than a dagger, except it has slightly better range, and I think a tiny bit more damage. You can actually 2-tap to the head on level 2 armor with, I believe, the stabs. However, it's for a 1 point weapon, you don't really, like the tiny extra range you get, I don't really feel like it's worth it. I'd rather have the strengths of the dagger than lose those strengths for whatever the short sword gives. And if I wanted the short sword, there's other options for like 1 more point that's way better. So I'm gonna put the short sword in B. Still a very cost-effective weapon, but it's not that great. Next, we got the cleaver. I'm gonna put the cleaver in C. Cleaver actually has some decent slashes for a 1 point weapon, but again, I much just prefer the dagger and the other stuff. There's just better weapons for like the 1 to 2 point range than the cleaver. I kind of think it's the worst one. Not that you can't do good with it. It also one-shot unarmored heads. Although if you're fighting in the back line and you have a cleaver as a backup weapon, you're probably not going to get dived by people with no head armor all that often. So I'm going to put it in C. Not the worst weapon, but it's outside my weapons in its point class and weapons in the point class above. So that's just that. Next, we're going to have the quarter staff or the bow staff or whatever you want to call it. Just staff. I'm going to put this in D. It has great range for the points, which is totally true, but it has terrible damage. I've never struggled to go up against a quarterstaff, but people have pulled one over with me with a dagger and stuff. You can use the quarterstaff if you want to, but besides the range, everything else is bad. It also takes like 5 hits to the body to kill someone. So it's just, and the damage barely goes up for a headshot. So just super low damage and not the very fast speed that you're going to want with a very low damage weapon. Just kind of ruins this. I don't like the quarterstaff. It's fun to use, not very good. Next up, we have the training sword, and this is going to be our F. Now, obviously, someone's probably out there saying like, well, it's the training sword. It's not supposed to be. You're right. And I was thinking about not even including it, but I'm going to include this just in case someone who's new to the game is watching and they just want to know. At first glance, you might feel like, if you don't actually check the damage values, like, oh, the training sword has a great move set, but it just does very little damage. And that's true, but it doesn't do very little damage. It does no damage. There's a pretty good chance you'll literally run out of stamina before, even if you're totally like destroying a guy, you'll run out of stamina before you can kill them because it just does single digits points of damage. Completely unusable. Not that it's supposed to be usable. It's great for training, just terrible for combat. So I'm putting it in here just so everyone knows, in case you didn't know, that it's great for training, but terrible for combat. Next, we have the arming sword. And if you watch my balance video or my most recent build video, you'll know my opinions on this. I'm going to be putting this in the S tier. And probably some people are already like typing the comments, I don't know. But I think the arming sword not only is the most cost-effective weapon in the game, it is so good for 2 points. Amazing thrusts, almost as good a thrust as the rapier in my opinion, and still great slashes. So it's almost as good as a 4-point weapon. I might even be better than some of the 4-point weapons. And could absolutely, like, this could be 3 points, and no one would bat a 9. Like, I think the arming sword is just super good. I'm gonna put it in S tier. I absolutely love it. When I'm in every one of my like backline builds, this is my go-to. This is my go-to weapon of choice for any kind of archer or engineer or whatever. And I just totally trash people. Like, they just don't expect it, and you just whip out a couple quick, like a stab and a feint and a stab, and they're dead. It's so good. If you haven't tried out the arming sword, absolutely try it out. On to the next 2-point weapon, however, we have the axe. And the axe is quite a fun weapon to use, but I'm going to be putting it in C. It has decent damage, and the slashes on it are okay, but compared to the arming sword, the damage isn't that much higher. Plus, the arming sword's moveset's way better. I think the arming sword would just run circles around the axe. That being said, the damage is still decent on the axe, especially against unarmored targets. And you do have the utility, both weapons can be thrown by the way, but you do have the utility of being able to take down objectives fast. So, not a bad idea for a backup weapon, or like, you know, I'll pick one up if I see it on the ground, but definitely not as good as the arming sword. After this, we have the Warhammer. I'm going to be putting the Warhammer in D, and again, people are really going to get mad at this. I think the Warhammer is just worse than the axe. It does slightly more damage at level 3, but a lot of the other things I think are a little bit worse about it, and then I don't think the slightly more damage on level 3 armor is worth the much less damage on the smaller bits of armor, and the earlier levels of armor. So I think the axe they're very similar weapons, but the axe has that extra utility for breaking down objects faster. Technically, the Warhammer could break down stone barricades, but I don't even know if there's a stone barricade in the game. There's probably one, and I'm just looking like an idiot right now. But all of the really important ones I can think of are wood, and the axe has a better damage profile, in my opinion. Unless you're specifically going after 3 armored people, which you kind of don't want to do with a 2-point weapon, the axe is better. So I'm going to put it in D tier. Warhammer is not as bad as the staff, but it's just much better options. Next up, we have the falchion. I'm going to be putting the falchion in B. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. One, because I'm a big Dark Souls guy. I mean, you know, we all love the falchion. No. But falchion's a pretty decent weapon. It's the only 3-point weapon, and for 3 points you get decent moveset. Like, pretty much everything about it is good. And it also has amazing drag, so you can really throw people off guard with those drags. And you can one-shot, I believe you can one-shot up to level 1 head armor on the throw, which is great. So, you know, having a strong throwable weapon that you can just one-shot people is super useful. I'm sure if you hurt them just a bit, the level 2 armor and level 3 head armor will go on too. Falchion is super useful. A little pricey for a backup weapon, but you can still do a lot with it. So I'm going to be putting it in B. If you haven't tried it out yet and you have a build where 3 points will fit in well, it's good. I've even seen a very good YouTuber use a buckler and then 2 falchions. So he has one and use it, and then when he has to throw it, he'll do it, and he's got a backup one. Definitely try it out if you haven't. Next up, we're getting into the 4-point weapons. And first up, we have the mace. I was almost going to put the mace in C, but I recently was playing against some really good people. I joined the competitive Discord, and I was just messing around with some people in a competitive Mordhau team. I was trying out the mace on them, and it's actually pretty good. The moveset is terrible, but the slow swings mean you can drag it okay, and it kind of throws people off. But by far the biggest strength is that the mace is a guaranteed 2-shot to the body. So even on level 3 armor, you can still 2-shot. That is an insane amount of damage for any weapon, let alone a 4-point weapon. There's so much damage behind this that kind of makes up for the bad moveset, bad range, shitty thrusts, yada yada yada. I was almost gonna put it in C, but the fact that you can, if you really know what you're doing, you can get so much good value out of this. I'm gonna put it in B. It's still, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it fits well in B. Next up we have the rapier, and one of my personal favorites, but I'm gonna be putting in B. And the reason why, this is one of those what I personally like to call shitty thrust weapons. And what I mean by a shitty thrust weapon is a thrust weapon that doesn't have good slashes. It's only on the thrust. Rapier does 5 damage to a level 3 legs, which is nothing. Now you can still use slashers to throw up your timings, and if you're hitting headshots even against level 3, it does some damage. And the Rapier's thrusts, of course, are amazing. They're super fast, and you can throw it. So Rapier has a lot of strengths, but those weaknesses are just so debilitating, especially when you get the higher levels of play, that I feel like it's not the most competitive weapon. Still decent. It's still great for front lines. Absolutely great at getting picks in a fight. Great for proccing Bloodlust. But it's just not the absolute king of kings. You just can't go around and destroy everyone. Any person who knows what they're doing is going to have an easy time countering thrusts, and this weapon is like 90% thrusts. So I'm going to put it in B. I think that pretty accurately fits it. If you're having trouble dealing with thrusts, plenty of YouTube tutorials out there to help you counter thrusts. It's actually very easy. Definitely go check them out. Next up, we have the short spear. I'm putting the short spear in C, and I don't fucking care what anyone's gonna say. I don't care, like the thousands of people I run into every day screaming that it's OP. Short spear, worse than the rapier. Slightly more range. It's just slower, and yeah, you could throw it and stuff, so it's not terrible. But I would just much prefer having a rapier over a short spear any day, unless I'm literally gonna throw the weapon, and they're good to throw. But then that's 4 points of your build gone in one throw that you could just easily miss. And if you miss, you just give it to your opponent. Even if you hit it, you give it to your opponent. So I'm putting them in C. They definitely have their place. Short spears are still decent in group combat. But they're just so trash in 1v1. And there are better weapons that are still great in group combat, but can do better in 1v1 fights anyways. So short spear still has its place in the game, and that's why it's not a D or an F. But they're just better stuff you can usually do most of the time. So I'm putting it in C, and that's the end of it. Yeah. Next up, we have the Bastard Sword. Almost wanted to put the Bastard Sword in B, but I kind of feel like the other I'll just use one-handed Bastard Sword, but the other kind of similar swords that are more expensive, you can still get more value out of them than you would just by sticking with a 4-point weapon. And I'll talk about that later. But the Bastard Sword is still in B, but definitely better than the rapier. The thrusts are not as good, but almost as good, and then you just have great slashes on top of that. So it's just a slightly tuned down rapier, but with none of the specific downsides of having a rapier. I think the Bastard Sword is just way better than, not way better, but I think it's just a little better than rapier. But I'm gonna keep it in B. But I do think it's better than the rapier. And these aren't labeled. These aren't like lined up by, short sword isn't better than Falchion, Falchion better than Mace. These are just, everything in B is just in B. But I'm just putting it out there. I think the Bastard Sword is better than the rapier, but not enough to move it to A. After that, we got the Messer. I don't know. I actually went to the competitive Discord, and I asked real quick, hey, we're gonna make a tier list, Messer A or B, and that sparked like a 15-minute debate. And I'm just gonna fucking put it in B, and that's the done with it. Messer, pretty good. Got great drag stuff. You can one-hand it and two-hand it if you want. I would just two-hand it, but you can one-hand it if you want to use it with the shield. Nothing super special about it though. Good moveset, good damage. It's a Messer. Moving on, we're gonna have the bill hook. I'm gonna put the bill hook in C, and there's really nothing wrong with the bill hook. It's just a cheap, okay polearm, but there's just nothing special about it either. The only special thing that the bill hook does is it actually, if you didn't know, if you hit a person riding a horse, it will tear them off the horse. The halberd used to do that, but it doesn't do that anymore. I don't know if it did that leading up to launch, because I never tested it, but I think it got changed a long time ago. I don't know. But the bill hook does have that little bit of utility, which is quite nice. Also, the primary side has negative knockback, which means they pull you a bit closer, but it's pretty negligible. I don't really notice it. Although I don't use the bill hook too often. But the billhook's like a good weapon, and it's probably at the higher end of C, but it's just not crazy. Like there's nothing special about it. It's just a billhook, so it has its place, and I like it. I don't think it needs to have any big buffs or whatever, but it's just there. Nothing super special, so I'm just gonna put it in C. Next one is the longsword. I'm gonna put the longsword in A. Some people might want to say it's a B weapon, and I can understand why. But I just kind of feel like for 5 points you're getting probably the most versatile weapon in the game. Great move set, good range, good damage. It's great at 1v. You can use it in 1v1s and in group combat. The alternate mode gives you some extra hefty damage against armor. Excuse me. It can throw up your opponent's timings on your attacks, as attacks are different speed, and also is decent for using it in CQB or like, well, it's all CQB, but you know, in tight spaces where you can't get those nice swings and those nice drags around. So I'm gonna put it in A. It's not like the strongest weapon in the game, but it's like you can't go wrong with a longsword, right? Longsword can basically is a expert on nothing, but it's a master of nothing, but whatever the expression is. You know, it's good at everything. It's not a master at anything, but it's good at everything. Just about. So I'm putting in A, essentially for the versatility. And yeah, I just feel like it's a great A weapon. Some people might say it's a B. There's definitely better options, and I'll talk about that soon. But I'm gonna put it in A. Next up, we have the War Axe. This is the 5-point axe, not the 6-point axe. So I'll talk about that in a bit. I'm gonna put the War Axe in B. The War Axe, not the best weapon in 1v1s, but it's definitely usable in 1v1s. And it is a great weapon in front lines, especially when you're using like a bloodless build. He's got good drags. It'll one-shot up to level 1 helmets. It's great for just chopping off people's heads. Good damage, and it carries that damage all the way up to level 3 armor. It still has decent damage values. Won't one-shot, but still very good damage values. And the big swings means you can still get good drags. Obviously, the thrust is terrible because it's an axe without a point. So very low damage, but you can still use it just to poke damage. And sometimes the damage values work out, so all you need is that thrust to get them over 100 points. So it's not terrible. I'm going to put it in B. Very good on front lines if you know how to use it, and you can still use it in 1v1s. Pretty good. Next up, we have the Battle Axe, the next axe, and I'm putting the Battle Axe in C. And the main reason why that is because basically I would rather have a War Axe and a dagger than just a Battle Axe. The Battle Axe does less damage than the War Axe, I believe, in most parts. Maybe a little better, and you have the alternate mode for this stuff. But I just like the War Axe better. I like the feel of it way better. And I see a lot of more people using the War Axe than the Battle Axe anyways. So I'm going to put it in C. And again, having a War Axe and then having a dagger for the super close moments or just finishing someone off is going to be way better than having a Battle Axe. And it's the same cost. So I'm going to put the Battle Axe in C. I think the War Axe is the much better option. Let me know if you disagree. Moving on. We have the S-Stock. I'm putting the S-Stock in A tier. One more point that a longsword. The S-Stock is what I call a not shitty thrust weapon because it has great thrust and it's primarily there for thrusting, but doesn't really lose out on having terrible slashes. The S-Stock has great thrust with great range, and that's super useful in both 1v1s and getting picks in front lines, but it also still has decent slashes. So the pointy boy is very versatile. You can just do so much with it. It's got so many good strengths, and it just doesn't have a huge amount of weaknesses. Great weapon. Can't go wrong with it. If you haven't tried it out, yeah, definitely try it out. Just super good in pretty much everything you can do. So versatile with strengths. Putting it into A. After that, we have the Executioner Sword. I know this is some of people's favorite swords. I'm going to put it in B simply because the thrusts on it are just so bad. The Executioner Sword has a lot of strengths. Crazy damage on the slashes. It'll one-shot all level 0 armor, including the legs. Meaning, if anyone skips a leg day, all you have to do is aim for the legs and you'll one-shot them. Super useful. If anyone's not paying attention, that'll absolutely catch them off guard. So it's great on front lines for just cleaving through people, and you can still use it in 1v1s. It just, without the thrust being really bad, it kind of falls down a bit. And also in 1v1 duels, people usually have leg armor because they're not as strapped as points because they don't need things like blood loss and a bunch of utility and stuff. So not as good as in 1v1s, and the damage value doesn't get its full value Those damage numbers don't get their full value out in 1v1s very often, but it's still a good weapon. Not as good as some of the other stuff in the S and A tier, but I'm going to put it in B, and I feel comfortable putting it in B. I think that's where it belongs. Up next, we have the Great Sword. This is going to be our second S tier, the longer sword. Reason being, very similar to the long sword. The Great Sword is almost the same weapon. Some of the values, a little bit. I think it's like a little bit more damage and probably a little bit less speed and stuff. But the alternate mode's really useful. It's got extra range, and I believe it's definitely worth those 2 points if you can fit it into your build to go long sword to go Great Sword over the long sword. The Great Sword, for those 2 points, you get enough out of it to justify spending it when you can afford it. So I'm gonna put the Great Sword in S tier over the long sword. I think it's the better weapon. Both are very good. Great Sword's just a little bit better. Next up, we have the Maul. Maul's F tier. No, I'm just joking. The Maul's gonna be put into A tier. The Maul is like, we all know. All right, we all know what the Maul does. One shots to the head. Super high risk, high reward game. Also, though, if you get landed 1 or 2 thrusts on the body, then a single body shot will still finish them off. So even though the thrusts are terrible and do bad, well, not terrible, but they do bad damage, the way that the damage values work out with the Maul is that it usually doesn't matter too much. So the Maul's great. Maybe it's a B tier weapon. I don't know. It's just so fun, and it's become such a classic already. I feel like it's just super fun to fight. It's one of the most recognizable weapons in Mordhau for people to play, and we all just love going against it, right? Because like the instant you fall for a feint or you just mess up, you're like whole life flashes before your eyes, and you just freak out and you gotta get away from it as fast as possible. Super fun. Love them all. I'm gonna put it in A tier. Maybe it's a B tier weapon, but it's decent, and it has a very unique strength that no other weapon can have, which is it can always one-shot someone. So, and also you can throw it, and it does a lot of damage if you throw it, if you land the hit. So I'm gonna put it in A. Maybe I'm wrong. Whatever. Next up, we have the Pole Axe. I am going to be putting the Pole Axe in B. The Pole Axe is a great polearm. It's got good range, and pretty much everything about it is good. You can switch up the heads for different damage values and so on and so forth. So it's got a lot of strengths. Some people can just go absolutely ham with this thing. They do these crazy swings and like overs. Like, they'll just like move their camera around and stuff just to get thrusts around into the opponent. A lot of potential. Very good weapon. I'm gonna put it in B tier because there's some other options I think are a little bit better, but it's still just a great weapon. And it was not gonna break the bank either. It's not like the halberd, which basically is your entire build almost for the halberd. So the pole axe is pretty decent, especially if you don't run a good amount of armor or some perks with it. I like the pole axe in B tier. I haven't tried it out yet, and you want to use a polearm, it's probably a good place to start. Next up, we have the Barbershade. I might get some hate for this because the Barbershade actually can have some really good swings, but I'm gonna put it in C tier. Now, the Barbershade does decent damage and some good range, but I just feel like it doesn't do enough to justify being up there in the B tier. There are some strengths with it, and you can do some really crazy, very long drags with it, but better players are probably going to, especially better players that are familiar with the matchup, are probably going to be able to recognize that more often and stuff. This might be more of like a noob destroyer than it is just a good all-around weapon. So I'm going to put it in C tier. I'm sure you can still do well with this weapon. You can do well with all the C tier weapons. You can do well with the D tier weapon. But it just doesn't, like, there's nothing really special about it that would bring it up there. I think it's just an average weapon. Doesn't mean it's bad. C is not a bad score. It just doesn't mean it's a great weapon. If you think I'm wrong, you can tell me, but I'm going to put it in C. Up next, we have the Evening Star. I'm going to be putting this in B. Evening Star, sort of similar to something like the Mace. It does great damage. It's two-handed, but one of the things that happens, one of the things that's special about the Evening Star is that it still has good thrust. You can see it's got a little tip there on the end. The thrusts not only are just decent and decent thrusts in terms of their range and everything, but they also still do decent damage. So the Evening Star is a great weapon for if you want to have some hefty damage you still want to mix up your moves and stuff. It's quite good. It's a lot of strengths, but it doesn't have a huge amount of weaknesses. So I'm gonna put it in B tier. I think it's a pretty decent weapon. Up next, we have this spear, And I'm putting the spear in fucking C tier. This is the hill I will fucking die on. I don't fucking give a shit. I'm sorry. See, the spear, and obviously a bunch of people are like, oh, but you get how many kills with it? I don't care. Yeah, you can fucking like sit in the back of the front line and front lines and fucking get some kills, but you can do the other shit too. And the spear is fucking Garbo in 1v1. They're just better options. I feel like the Polearm is better and for 1v1s and cheaper, and the halberd is way better than the spear and only costs 1 point more. Right? Yes, it only costs 1 point more. So yeah, it still has a place. It's still good in group combat because it's good at pressuring people while having someone in front, while having a teammate in front of you. So it's not like a failed weapon. Like, you know, still got its place. So, but it's just not great in 1v1s. And like, so I'm just gonna put it in the C tier. Like, it's got a place and has some strengths, but it's got a whole bunch of weaknesses. And it's just, and if you're struggling to go up against a spear, especially in, like, I can understand if, you know, you're getting attacked by multiple people and there's a spear poking at the same time, then that's hard. But if you're struggling just to go up against the spear in like a 1v1, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I just so many other weapons I'd not want them to. There's so many other weapons that my opponent, if they had, I'd rather they have a spear over, just for it to be easier. So I'm putting this spear in C tier. Up next we have this Y-hander. I almost want to put it in C tier, but I feel like this Y-hander, in my opinion, just gets a bad rep because bad people use it all the time because it's one of the default classes. But in reality, you've got great range, decent damage, an okay moveset. Alternate mode's kind of useful. Just a big sword, you know. So it's not. I don't think it's like the best thing ever. I'd probably still rather have a great sword or a bunch of other stuff. But I'm gonna put it in B tier. There's just too many strengths for the weapon for me to want to put it in C tier. You probably do some nice drags on and stuff, yada yada. So yeah, B tier. And last but definitely not least, we have the halberd. Now, personally, I actually don't like the halberd. I don't know what it is about it, but I just can't seem to use it very well compared to the other weapons I'm used to using. So I'm gonna have to just rely on other people's opinions on this one. I mean, I still know that I think this is true, but and of course I've used the weapon quite a few times. But I'm gonna put the halberd in S tier, even though I almost don't want to because it's just so expensive. But it's just so good. It has every single aspect of it is either good or great. Like, and obviously it should be because it costs so freaking much, and that's the only reason why I struggle to put an S tier, because it costs so much. But it's just everything about the weapon is so good. Damage, like the moveset is great, the range is great excels and drags, and you've got still good speed and good damage. So there's really, the only downside is just you're gonna be lacking in the armor a little bit. You're probably gonna skip leg day if you're using a halberd, so watch out for executioner swords. But it's just so good, and especially if you don't start off with the halberd and you pick one up or whatever, then you're just amazing. If you have like a dodge build with good armor and then you pick up a halberd, oh my god, or bloodlust or whatever. So I just like, it's just super strong, and like there's just so many good things about it. I'm gonna put an S tier. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the cost is too much, but I'm just gonna leave it in S tier. All right, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to first link this tier list down below, this template. So if you want to come and make your own, feel free. I checked out ones already existing, and they're all kind of bad. I don't even think any of them actually use the pictures. Maybe there is one, I just didn't realize, but there isn't. They don't actually use the pictures in game. They just Google image random shit, which just looks really dumb. And half of them don't even have like the complete list of weapons, and half of them will have just like rocks in there and stuff. Which you can still include that in a tier list, but like not for what I'm doing. So feel free to use that if you want. Second, trying to get to 100 subscribers. There's a video I want to make talking about everything I learned getting to 100 subscribers, which I'll make soon. I might not make it exact when I get to 100 subscribers, but if you want to know, and especially if you're starting out a small YouTube channel and you want to know all the things that I've learned over the years, which is quite a lot of stuff that I would have loved to know earlier, I appreciate if you went subscribed. Definitely, you don't have to hit the bell or whatever. I don't care. My goal will one day be to get to 1,000 subscribers and get my channel monetized. So you don't have to hit the bell. You don't have to do whatever. And if I get to 1,000 subscribers and you see me one day in the future, you can literally unsubscribe. Don't care, whatever. But you don't have to do anything. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Always appreciate it. As always, let me know how wrong I am in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you guys later.